Hello and welcome to another video by yours truly, WattheWut. This video is an analysis on Sword Art Online. And if you're a fan of Sword Art Online or a fan of other content just like this, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any more videos. Alright, let's go. Now, upon reading this title, you might be thinking a couple of things. Many of those things are probably just variations of me having bad taste or being stupid, but hear me out. Kirito and Sword Art Online in general get this bad rep for years and years of being the butt of the anime community, joke. And while I don't disagree that SAO has its problems, I made an entire video on that, it's a stretch to say that every member of the cast is bland and lacks character or character development. An obvious example being Asuna, whose entire character arc in the original Aincrad storyline was learning to make the most of the situation that she was in and live her life freely, something she didn't have the liberty of doing in her constricting life of standards and expectations, something further explored in the Mother's Rosario arc. But I think the perception Kirito has is not just wrong, but interesting, because even I'll agree that I fell into the common belief of who Kirito is. He's a wish fulfillment character who's overpowered and has girls thirsting over him every second of every day, despite that making no sense because he's just some incel nerd. But that can be said about any character similar to him if you remove the nuance. But such a blank slate, as it were, wouldn't be as iconic as he is, because let's be perfectly honest, Kirito is one of the most iconic anime characters in the past decade, if not ever. The mere mention of Kirito puts an idea in your head, no matter how much people proclaim that his personality is that of a wooden block. So let's make a case for the real Black Swordsman, the beater, the hero of Aincrad. Let's discuss why Kirito is a deeper character than you would probably think, and possibly, dare I say, a good character. So it's important that before we go into Kirito's character, we understand the common misconceptions regarding Kirito, starting with the fact that he's overpowered. Common points of reference include the fact that he gets a bunch of unique sword skills no one else gets, an auto healing factor, he hacks the game in order to get a unique item, he can cut bullets out of the air, so on and so on. The most common of these complaints is the aforementioned auto healing, which, if you watch the scene again, you realize a couple of things. He's on a lower floor with lower level players with a much higher level. On top of that, the auto healing was only healing a small percentage equivalent to the minuscule amount of damage he was taking from the underleveled players. It's like going to a gym in Pokemon where they only have level 10s and you walk in with your level 100 Venusaur with leftovers. This is why you see him still taking damage in the boss fights and in the fight against Heathcliff. They're above him in strength. The aforementioned dual wielding skill was something that was meant to be distributed to players progressively regardless. Kirito, being our main character, is the only one to our knowledge aside from Heathcliff to receive it, since Kirito destroyed Kayaba's plan to go up the boss levels and progressively discover the other skills. And it's not as if the dual wielding skill made him that much stronger than Asuna, who was still just as fast as him despite using only one sword. The hacking of the unique item was literally only because Kirito placed Yui's data into a held item, something presented to us previously when Pina turned into a held item after death and was resurrected. Regarding his ability to fight with a sword, we are given knowledge that he had been raised in a kendo dojo. So while not an expert, he at least has more actual knowledge than the average person. The cutting of bullets was because of Kirito's out-of-the-box thinking by manipulating the bullet lines and aforementioned experience with the sword. Do these things make Kirito overpowered? Yes, they do, but not so overpowered that I think people should find him ridiculous. By simply looking into established information, a lot of these problems don't necessarily make Kirito an invincible god like many people believe the show presents him as. It's akin to the misunderstandings of characters like Naruto or any other main character in any action series like that. While being overpowered, they still manage to be at the level where it's believable in universe, as well as the fact that many of them actually lose, or many times at the brink of death. Kirito loses to Heathcliff, says many times that Asuna is stronger than him, is only capable of beating the Gleam Eyes because of the other two helping him, and even then almost died, so on and so on. While stuff like the auto healing might raise a few eyebrows, it's excusable enough to where it's arguably nitpick at best. But these things are seen as logical issues that many will cite to debunk Kirito as a character, all things that don't really matter for the sake of his character, and are more often than not the victim of realism arguments that fail to acknowledge verisimilitude. But they're important to address because they feed into the biggest misunderstanding of Kirito as a pure wish fulfillment character. I don't necessarily blame anyone that perceives Kirito as this overpowered, boring character, because for one, the aforementioned issues of conflating verisimilitude with realism, but also because the overall tone of the first 3 arcs of SAO is dominantly serious. Because of the nature of the death game in Aincrad, Kirito is forced into situations that require him to be serious. The Fairy Dance arc also puts another catastrophic event at its center, so yet again Kirito is more often than not acting like a tough guy. The Phantom Bullet arc is the same in both regards. It's arguably not until Caliber, and more importantly Ordinal Scale, that we come to understand just who Kirito is. He's an asshole. Because of the nature of the story of Ordinal Scale, all of the events take place in the real world. As such, we see Kirito acting in a situation where he is not concerned with some big catastrophic issue, and it's funny to see him whining about the fact that he has to go outside and that he'd rather go home and play his video games. Seeing this, you retroactively recall all of the moments where Kirito is not fighting and just dicking around in prior seasons, and you realize that he's an awkward, arrogant, antisocial asshole who only does what he wants unless he has someone who he cares about that forces him to do things. He's also drawn in an art style that's become common to most light novel protagonists that's meant to portray him to look more like a typical Japanese male. So while not looking like an incel, it's not hard to see him this way. He already from the beginning prefers not to hang out with people and only decides to during his time with the Midnight Black Cats because he just wanted to try it, something he came to regret and scarred him for life. Even when he told Klein he wanted to be on his own, he's just so awkward that he can't express that and chooses to be an edgy asshole about it. He openly is just kind of rude to people when he talks to them, even in the face of someone like Asuna, and kind of just talks to authority however he wants. Also realize that he dresses entirely in black. When he enters Alfheim, he doesn't even check the powers of the different races, he just picks the one wearing black. He enters GGO and is told to his face that the sword is lame and dumb, and he spends most of his money on it and picks the one that's black. He's an edgelord who adheres to his weird edgy chuny preferences on top of being arrogant and antisocial. That's why it's funny to me when people say he has no character, because it's so easy for me to describe him. In fact, this aspect of his character is so clear that a common term among Japanese otaku to describe someone who is arrogant and thinks they're hot shit is a Kirito. He's arrogant, antisocial, awkward, lazy until motivated by something he wants, doesn't know how to speak his mind when he just wants to express his real feelings, and in general is just kind of a shitty person. From the outside. Kirito's reasoning behind his upbringing and his relationship with his family is hinted at during his time in Sword Art Online. He tells Silica that he's protecting her because she reminds him of his sister who he's sort of drifted away from. He, in general, due to his familial circumstances, later revealed to be because of his parents being dead and being adopted by his relatives. Never really felt like he belonged anywhere. He found that place in the world of video games, and even more so when he found himself in the VR landscapes of SAO. VR, while simultaneously being an escape from reality, also served as a place where he ended up forming relationships that he never had the courage to form in the real world. But after coming out of Aincrad after 2 years, he decided to reform the bonds he once tried to separate in the real world. The relationship between Kirito and Suguha is interesting in and of itself because it's perceived as Kirito leading on another girl as well as being a weird incest relationship. Which again, I don't blame anybody for perceiving it that way considering how oddly the fairy dance arc is structured. But it's important to realize that Kirito and Suguha's relationship is not that of one boy leading on his sister, but something a little more complicated. Because of Kirito finding out that Suguha wasn't really his sister but rather his cousin on top of the knowledge that he wasn't really part of the family, Kirito drifted away from her and locked his feelings off. After being trapped in SAO, Suguha's feelings of longing for that relationship to be repaired as well as the pain that she felt seeing her brother locked in that world made her realize that she didn't just love him as a brother but more romantically, feeling she tried desperately to lock away. In an attempt to cope with those feelings and to understand the person that she harbored those feelings for, she joined Alfheim Online to be in the world that captured Kirito's heart, the world where he found love. But unknowingly, she fell in love with that brother she promised she would never pursue, only coming to terms with their feelings and finally cementing her relationship as brother and sister after finding closure at the end of the season. This wouldn't have happened, mind you, without Kirito going out of his way to rectify the relationship that he left in limbo. The stigma surrounding Kirito and his harem seems to stem from a misunderstanding behind most harem protagonists in general, which you can find more clarification in my Nisekoi videos, but it's interesting seeing people not being able to comprehend why he's able to attract as many girls around him as he does. The simple answer is that almost all of them are girls who owe him their lives, but with each one there's a clear reason behind their relationship. Lisbeth was so afraid of dying after seeing all of her friends fall one by one that she holed herself up in her blacksmith shop, something that Kirito ended up relating to after his failure to protect the Midnight Black Cats. So Kirito took Lisbeth to the mountains and showed her the beauty of this virtual world, showing her that she could still go out and live, and that parting with her helped him feel alive again. Silica was similar, having been so weak and used by so many different people. This one arrogant loner was the only person willing to risk himself to help her. Sinon, who had struggled with the guilt and trauma of killing someone out of self-defense, couldn't find anyone who could relate to her until she met Kirito in the world of Gun Gale Online. Someone who was forced to kill in order to protect the lives of the ones he loves. Someone who blamed himself for the deaths of so many and lived with the trauma with every passing day. In essence, in Kirito, these people were able to find someone who related to them, went above and beyond for what they needed, and did so without any regard for fear or what-ifs. They didn't have the courage to face their past until he rudely and without fear barged his way into their lives, so it's not hard at all to believe that they would fall for him, because he was able to reach out to them. They may not have gotten his love in the end, with many of them accepting that their feelings won't be returned, but finding friendships and bonds that they cherished because of him. But despite that, he could only ever think about how he failed to save others before. The failure of Kirito to save the Midnight Black Cats is something that is brought up again and again throughout the series, because it solidified this mindset of preferring isolation that Kirito has. He hung out with them and hid his true power out of fear that he would be judged for his status as the beater, the title that he took on in the first floor, to take the blame of all the beta testers that the traumatized players were demonizing, as well as some form of atonement for the death of Diavel. He tried his best to live out a fulfilling life, even finding a fellow loner afraid of death in Sachi, but his arrogance and his refusal to expose his true self to his comrades caused their deaths, one by one in front of his eyes. He could have done something about it, warned them to get out of there, or that he had the knowledge and level of experience to prove his suspicions, but his fear of losing that comfort caused it to be ripped from his hands. He even attempted to atone for it by bringing them back to life, only for his efforts to be all for naught. It was in his attempts to make a connection that he failed, while the one connection that was most important to him was what saved him. Asuna was different from every other person that he met. Everyone else there seemed to understand the fundamentals of the game, but Asuna was new to the whole thing. She just happened to be in the game by mistake and was fighting desperately to get out of there as soon as she could, believing that nothing in the world mattered. But in Kirito, she saw someone who loved this world and had a place to belong, who taught her the joy of living her own life. In return, she was able to comfort him and reteach him the value of forming those bonds. They, by working together, were able to save each other, creating a love that Kirito and Asuna cherished and were only able to find because of that virtual world. All of these aspects of who Kirito is, his fear of forming bonds, his love for Asuna that was formed out of mutual understanding and salvation that one did for the other, his love for the virtual world, and his arrogant yet awkward demeanor play a massive role in every successive season of Sword Art Online. But nowhere do these aspects bring themselves to the forefront better than in Ordinal Scale and Alicization. Ordinal Scale is a film all about the importance and love for the virtual world that Kirito had experienced, all of these emotions, all of these experiences that formed who he was and allowed him to repair his relationship with his sister and find friends. While there was indeed trauma and failure that he and Asuna experienced, those memories were proof of their existence, and to forget them is like letting that part of him die. So even though he hated augmented reality, and even though there was risk, the life that his wife experienced and cherished was on the line, so he fought with all he had. In Alicization, the core of his personality is even more plainly exposed in the first episode, where he reverts to the form of a child without his memories. And with his memories, after being thrust in after an attack from a surviving Laughing Coffin member, he is able to realize that this world of ones and zeros is still full of life, of human beings with souls who are just as real as he is, and whose lives are as precious as his, forming a strong friendship with Yu-Gi-Oh and Alice. The entire story of Alicization is mainly from the perspectives of Yu-Gi-Oh and Alice, and how his actions end up changing who they are. He was someone who experienced what it's like to take life and protect it, something the Integral Knights who lived in stagnation lacked, a will and a driving force that allowed him to surpass them, something that his friends in this world were able to learn by being with him. He was able to draw out the courage of Yu-Gi-Oh, who was so afraid of defying the system, having been living in his small town hacking away at the Giga Cedar without any intentions of ever breaking it, settling for his comfort. But Kirito was someone with dreams and a goal that he strived for, who knew what it was like to stagnate and be comfortable in solitude, and that person pushed Yu-Gi-Oh to find his potential, and together they were able to become strong enough to defeat the strongest in the kingdom, among them the brainwashed childhood friend that Yu-Gi-Oh had failed to save. He was able to make the Integral Knight Alice Synthesis 30 fight for a cause that she believed in, something she struggled to come to terms with, having all of her memories and identity jumbled around and manipulated. But Kirito, who held such love and passion for who he was and the humanity that he found in the virtual world and in the real world, were enough to inspire Alice to fight regardless of what the rules of this world had told her. His actions as someone who understood the humanity of the virtual and the real were able to unite the VR players whose lives he changed, because it was in this world that he was able to find love and live for the first time. One last aspect I want to touch on is Kirito's tendency to take blame upon himself. Diavel's death in the first boss floor of Aincrad was something he got blamed for, even if it wasn't fully his fault. Yet he still became the villain for the sake of everyone else. He rejected Klein's offer to party up out of fear of getting hurt. He took the loss of the Midnight Black Cats to heart, and when Asuna died at the hands of Heathcliff, he lost all will to fight until he decided to defeat him once and for all. And in the world of Underworld, despite saving the world of humanity from the reign of the Pontifex, he still lost his best friend who had finally gained the will to live, something he blamed himself for, so much that it damaged his psyche. But he still managed to save people. His actions saved the players of SAO. His actions allowed Asuna to find a path for herself. His actions gave a traumatized girl a way to cope with their fear. His words spoke hope and inspiration of a boy who was so cowardly he couldn't even save the girl he loved. His actions freed the Integral Knight bound by destiny that was forced upon her. And it's his actions that will save the world of Underworld.
Guys,
Thank you for watching another video by yours truly, WattheWut. I would like to thank Val Maxwell of Anime Movement. He reached out to me to help me edit this video, and he did a pretty good job, so make sure you go check them out. I would like to now thank my patrons, namely people like FlutterOutButt, Flarboo, thanks Nitrorad, Mr. Cynical, Natty, and Rents Paid. If you want more information on videos, you can always follow me on Twitter or check out my Discord, and if you don't want to support me on Patreon, you can always donate to my coffee. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Like, subscribe, and join us in Idle Hell. Ayy, WattheWut hive mind, never make you frown. Ayy, good times, love life, got all the idols down. Ayy, ain't nobody better than the anime master. Preaching to the masses, but we better than a pastor. Attitude boogeyman coming out the rafters. Kamarada driving, we be racing way faster. Pull a hella bitches, call me Ichijoraku. Weeaboo, president, craft store, top two. Betters like Impachi with us.